It's Parsha Lech Lecha. We meet Abraham. This is the beginning, really, of the story of the Jewish people. And what a story it is. Abraham is told to leave his homeland, leave the house of his father, leave his birthplace, and travel to the unknown. And he travels. And he takes with him a retinue. Lot, his brother-in-law / nephew, Sarai, as she's called, his wife, and all the souls that they made in Haran. And they travel. And they arrive in Canaan, and they travel all over Canaan. And although God promises that things will be good in Canaan, there's a famine, and he has to flee. And then his wife is accosted. It's a whole story. Abraham's traveling all over Canaan, has to go down to Egypt. His wife is kidnapped. She is eventually returned, and they leave from Egypt, and they ascend back to the land of Canaan with great wealth. And the first of the 3 segments that I want to cover today talk about the departure of Lot from Abraham. Lot is Abraham's student, confidant, sidekick of sorts, his relative. Lot is Sarah's brother, and he's also Abraham's nephew because Abraham married his niece. Sarah was Abraham's niece. And they're traveling together, and he seems to be with him all along, step by step. But now when they ascend back from Egypt, Lot has been enriched. And we have 2 massive camps, the camp of Abraham and the camp of Lot. And there is conflict. There is friction between these 2. And there's insufficient grazing area for both of these flocks, the flock of Abraham and the flock of Lot. And there's a fight. There's a conflict. The shepherds of Lot and the shepherds of Abraham are at odds. And Abraham tries to resolve this tension. And he tells Lot, let's not fight. After all, we're like brothers. Between me and between you and between my shepherds and your shepherds, we're like brothers. It's improper for us to fight. Let's separate in an amicable fashion. There's a lot of land. Let's separate from each other. You go right, I go left. You go left, I go right. And Lot makes a fateful decision. The verse tells us, this is chapter 13, verse 10. Lot lifted his eyes, and he saw the Kikar HaYarden, the plain of the Jordan. It's a paradise. He sees the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah, and they are like the garden of Hashem. They're like the garden of Eden. They're really literal paradise. And Lot decides to go there. And they depart. And Lot and Abraham are no longer together. Now Lot makes several reappearances in the Torah. He's going to be captured. Abraham will save him. And of course, in next week's Parsha, the time expires for the people of Sodom and Gomorrah, and God sends angels to overturn said cities. And they spare Lot, they save Lot and his wife, at least temporarily, and his 2 daughters. His wife turns around, she turns into a pillar of salt, and Lot is saved with his daughters, end up in a cave, and something quite ignominious happens, where they are under the impression that the world is over. It's time to repopulate, even if that means that we become pregnant from our father. Lot is inebriated, and Lot, in successive nights, he cohabits with his daughters, producing the bastard sons that are the namesakes of the eponymous nations of Ammon and Moab. So Lot's going to make some reappearances, but now his time with Abraham is up. He has made his choice. He has chosen to head in one direction, and he heads to the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah. Now, if you pay careful attention to these precise words of the verse, you find something very, very interesting. As we know, certainly this year, we're trying to go a little bit deeper behind the scenes, beneath the text of Scripture, of the Torah. When we read a verse, we have to realize that there are no extra words. And every apparent extra word It must be there for a reason. It's not extra. And thus, when we find a word that seems to be extra, we're actually discovering a lesson. Lot has to choose. Abraham tells him, go right, I go left, I go right. You choose. It's up to you. It's possible, maybe, that Lot could have said, no. Abraham, I'll stay with you, and we'll resolve our conflicts. Lot didn't make that choice, much to his eternal ignominy. He chooses to go to Sodom and Gomorrah. And why? The verse tells us. Chapter 13, verse 10. He looked towards the plain of the Jordan, and it was all fertile. And then the verse adds, before God destroyed the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah. It was like the garden of God. It was paradise. Now, of course, this is a spoiler alert. In next week's Parsha, God will overturn the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah. He will rain fire and sulfur upon those cities, and they will no longer look like an idyllic paradise. And the verse stresses that when Lot made a decision to move there, it was before Sodom and Gomorrah were turned into a hellhole, an apocalyptic hellhole, a smoldering canyon of ruin. Don't think that Lot went there after it was completely destroyed. Oh no, it was before God destroyed it. And before it was destroyed, it was paradise. Now the question is, well, obviously, if Lot went there, he didn't go there after it was completely uninhabitable. Why does the verse need to stress that Lot went to Sodom, to Sodom and Gomorrah, before it was destroyed, when it was like a Garden of Eden? There are some extra words there. And there cannot be extra words in the Torah. So the answer, perhaps, is that Lot understood, even when he went there, that its days were numbered. Lot, after all, was a student of Abraham. As we shall see later on in his narrative, Lot does kindness almost like Abraham does. Lot bakes matzah because it's Pesach. He obviously has a deep understanding of the Abrahamic ideals. Lot was able to interact with angels. He wasn't a dunderhead. He wasn't a simpleton. He wasn't just a layperson who didn't have any understanding. When Rashi interprets the words that when Abraham tells Lot we're brothers, Rashi says that they were similar. They had a similar visage, they had a similar countenance. On a spiritual level, that means that Lot and Abraham looked similar physically. But because the physical is just a manifestation of the spiritual, what this actually means is that Lot was spiritually similar to Abraham. We do find that Abraham excels. He's the paragon of kindness. And Lot also does Abrahamic kindness. Abraham is the initiator, really, of modern monotheism, faith, really. And Lot celebrates Passover by making matzah. Passover, after all, is the festival of faith. Abraham's qualities and Abraham's greatness is in some way manifested in Lot. We can call Lot a poor man's Abraham. Certainly after all of his assets were destroyed in Sodom and Gomorrah. But Lot was not a simpleton. He was sophisticated. And the verse tells us that he chose Sodom and Gomorrah before it was destroyed. Lot understood that the corruption and the sinfulness that was present in Sodom and Gomorrah cannot be tolerate it and will not endure much longer. He knew that the days were numbered. He knew it was a matter of time before it was destroyed. And he went there nonetheless. He went there, why? Because it was not yet destroyed. It was before the destruction. And Lot said, maybe we can make hay while the sun still shines. We can still enjoy the music on the deck of the Titanic for another hour or so. That was Lot's calculus. Lot was not someone who didn't know that the fate of Sodom and Gomorrah was destruction. He knew it. And he went there knowing that. Because it's still paradise. Let's grab as much of paradise as we can before the destruction. Now, our sages tell us that Lot, he is representative on an allegorical level to the Yetzer Hara, to the evil inclination. And we'll see more about that in segment number 2 of this week's Parsha Podcast. When the Torah reveals a quality that is featured in Lot, a negative quality, a negative penchant, a negative tendency, that is a revelation about the character and the ideals and the modi operandi of the Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination that we all harbor within us. Part of the philosophy of the Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination, part of the ways that it gets us to sin, is not by ignorance. None of us think that we will be here on this world with our soul cased inside our body forever. You have all these people getting all those blood transfusions, longevity, outlive. Not a bad book, I must say. You may live a little bit longer, but everyone knows that our time here is temporary. The party's going to end. And we all have a tendency to be a bit like Lot. Yes, the party will end. Yes, Sodom and Gomorrah will be destroyed. But what a rollicking party it is right now. Let's maybe squeeze in some fun before the party ends. I've gotten into big trouble for saying this in the past. And every time I say it, they say, Rabbi, you're being way too insensitive. So this is going to be a little bit of a trigger maybe for some of y'all. I'm pushing buttons. I'm trying to elicit a reaction. You've been warned. Disclaimer. This is why I'm against the Make-A-Wish Foundation. Ooh, you didn't think you'd hear that opinion on the Parsha Podcast. This idea that someone's about to die. Let's give him a good time. Let him enjoy the physical life a little bit more. Party a little bit before the lights go out. That is Lot. That is the Yetzer Hara. That is this, let's go to Sodom and Gomorrah to party. Now, of course, we know that, taking a kid to Disneyland is not the same thing as going to a sinful place like Sodom and Gomorrah. Obviously. But the point, the principle that we're being taught over here is that we have to realize that our current orientation is not permanent. It's not eternal. And we have to think about what's going to be in the future. And we cannot only think about the short term, our tenure in this world when our soul is housed in a physical body, and when the consequences of our spiritual actions do not redound. You could go a whole lifetime without studying Torah, without doing mitzvos, and you won't really feel much. The consequences of our spiritual actions, they reverberate for eternity, but not at this point. We don't feel it. It's before there's any destruction, before there's any turmoil, before the sins of Sodom and Gomorrah are exacted upon by God. Lot knew that there was judgment. He knew there was an accounting and a reckoning that will happen to the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah. He knew that. And he went nonetheless. The Talmud tells us that one of the ways that a person can avoid sinning is by remembering the day of death. You remember that your tenure here is not forever. Your time here is limited. You will be ushered to a different world. Your soul will be extricated from your body. Your body will be buried, maybe even planted for the future, for the resurrection. And you will have to give an accounting and a reckoning before God. That's a terrifying notion. And it's a very productive thing to think about, our sages tell us, because that makes a person more likely to try to improve their behavior and live a life that they can defend before the Almighty, before the heavenly tribunal. So if you think about the day that you're going to die, you'll live a more productive and uplifting and meaningful and righteous life. Lot knew that Sodom and Gomorrah will die. And he says, let's go. It ain't dead yet. It's still a party house. Let's go and grab some while we still can. That is how the Yetzer Hara operates. And it's not just Lot who is emblematic of this attitude. We are going to meet in a few weeks the very different twins, Jacob and Esav. Chapter 25, verse 23 of Genesis, Esav says, I'm going to die. And why do I need this birthright? And the commentaries point out that Esav is behaving exactly like Lot. When he realized that he's going to die sometime in the future, he said, well, why do I need all this spiritual stuff? Let me have the bowl of red stuff. It's imperative for us to, realize that we're not going to be here forever. But even once you realize that, it's important to make the right choice. Lot realized that. Esav realized that as well. They're both representatives. They're both on an allegorical level, representing the Yetzer Hara. And there is a tendency that when a person's about to die, or they even think and contemplate about their death, instead of trying to pursue more righteousness, more mitzvos, more food for their soul forever, they want to go to Disneyland. They want to go do their bucket list. What a terrible idea, a bucket list. Before you kick the bucket, all the things you have to do. That's an attitude that looks at this world as the goal, trying to have as much pleasure as possible before you die. And that is the handiwork of the Yetzer Hara. We're all going to die. Nothing wrong with that. What we choose to do about that knowledge determines if we are like Lot or Esav, or we are the righteous people that the Mishnah is addressing by telling us, ruminate upon your death. Remember that you are temporary in this world, and repent and live up to those values accordingly. That's segment 1. Let's go to segment number 2. Lot and Abraham part from each other. Rashi tells us that when Lot departed Abraham, Abraham's prophecy was restored. Lot prevented Abraham from prophecy. And Abraham, after there was a bit of a scuffle, a bit of friction between the shepherds, that is when Abraham took the opportunity to separate himself from Lot. You imagine that Abraham knew that Lot was inhibiting his prophecy. And Abraham did not boot him to begin with. It seems like Abraham's teaching us a lesson. Even if you have a toxic relationship, someone like Lot who is disrupting your capacity to ascend and to live up to your potential, you don't embarrass them. And you don't lose the brotherhood. Abraham doesn't say, leave and get out of my sight. He says, you go right, I go left, left, I go right. We shouldn't be fighting, we're brothers. Oh, and by the way, after they separate, when Lot was in distress, Abraham came to his aid. That's how you get rid of toxic relationships. But we're trying to go a little bit deeper. As we know, the Torah is understandable on all sorts of levels. There are many dimensions to Torah. We're told that there are 70 facets of Torah and 50 layers of understanding of Torah. And there is Pshat, Remez, Drash, and Sod. There's the Pshat, the simple interpretation, the text as we would call it. And then there's the allegory, the Remez, where the Torah is saying things on one level, but on a different dimension, there is some sort of allegory that's being conveyed. And segment number 2 is discussing this event on an allegorical level. There's an enterprising righteous person, and he has Lot in his proximity. And he's trying to separate himself from Lot, from the Yetzer Hara. In this allegory, Abraham is the soul. Lot is the Yetzer Hara. How do you delicately separate these two? Says the Zohar, something very beautiful. Abraham says to Lot, let's not fight. Why are we fighting? I don't want to fight with you. Let's separate. A righteous person is always fighting with the Yetzer Hara. Yetzer Hara says do sins, he does mitzvos. Yetzer Hara says have bad character, he tries to fix his character. Yetzer Hara says don't study, he goes to the academy and goes to study. He's always battling the Yetzer Hara. And then he says, why don't you just separate from me? Let's not fight. Separate. You go left, and I'll go right. You go right, and I will go left. If a person is committed to fighting the Yetzer Hara, and they're always fighting in every dimension of a person's life, he or she is aware that there's a constant battle between the Yetzer Hara and themselves, and their spiritual standing and destiny is imperiled, and they're always on alert, and they're always fighting back. If someone is righteous enough to always be cognizant and aware of the Yetzer Hara and always fighting, there is a way for them to shake themselves free of the Yetzer Hara, just as Abraham got rid of the nemesis, Lot, who was in Abraham's proximity. Abraham told Lot, go right, I'll go left. You go left, I'll go right. Let's separate. If a person is so committed to fighting the Yetzer Hara, there is a possibility to actually shake yourself free of it. What happened to Lot? What happened in the allegorical level to the Yetzer Hara? He looks at the Jordan Plains, and he sees the city of Sodom and Gomorrah, and it's full of sinners. Sinners who won't be as problematic as Abraham. Abraham's always fighting with me. What a hassle. I'll go there. And Lot departs from Abraham. This reminded me of the old commercials that I used to hear for LoJack. I don't know if that's still in style, but it was like a low-tech way to protect your car from being stolen. It was like a lock that they placed upon your wheel. And I remember hearing that, the car thieves, they could pick the lock for the LoJack, but when they see a LoJack on your steering wheel, they say, you know what, the car that's next to you doesn't have the LoJack. I'll save myself the 60 seconds and I'll go break into that car and steal that one. So it didn't make you impervious to having your car stolen. It just made such a hassle for the thief. What the Zohar here is telling us is just make it such a hassle for the Yetzer Hara to fight you. It's not worth the pain. And it'll just go to Sodom and Gomorrah. There are plenty of people who won't be fighting, and those are much easier targets. If you're so irritating, you're just such a nudnik. You're always fighting and always finicky and never happy. The Yetzer Hara will just leave. It'll give up. It'll find other fish in the pond. And then what happens then? The following verse is that Abraham was laden. He was very laden. What was he laden with? On the allegorical level, Abraham was laden with righteousness and with Torah and with mitzvos. I found this to be a very beautiful insight. First of all, it's always nice to see this whole notion of the Torah being understood on multiple dimensions and levels. Abraham's the soul, and Lot's the Yetzer Hara, and this whole notion, this whole idea that you can free yourself of the Yetzer Hara by telling it, just go to some other place. Let's separate. Again, provided that there's the prerequisite of you always fighting and always being in conflict. There's always friction, which is a positive thing, to always be fighting with the Yetzer Hara. There comes a point where you can say, I'm done with you. And the Yetzer Hara will just give up. What a hassle to deal with. You always fighting. I'll just go find someone else. It just gives up. It goes right. You go left. It goes left. You go right, and we'll find other fish. Now, I find this to be very interesting because we don't think of the Yetzer Hara as having exhaustible powers. If it has infinite powers, if it has unlimited resources, if there's no scarcity for the Yetzer Hara, it could do both. It could fight the people or it could cause the people of Sodom and Gomorrah to sin and you, the righteous. Moreover, as we know, the more righteous a person is, the Talmud tells us, the stronger their Yetzer Hara. Kol hagadol mechaveru yitzro gadol himenu. So what's this idea that the Yetzer Hara will leave you? I don't understand this point of the Zohar. It's possible that when someone becomes greater, their Yetzer Hara is greater, but the other Yetzer Hara, the less sophisticated Yetzer Hara, that one actually leaves and goes and picks on the people of Sodom and Gomorrah. Meaning that as you elevate, as you transcend from level to level, there is a type of Yetzer Hara that you lose that just gives up on you. You have the spiritual LoJack. It leaves and it goes to pick on others, but you are upgraded. Your soul is elevated now. You're on a higher spiritual level. Oh, and you also have a more spiritual Yetzer Hara that fills the void of the Yetzer Hara that departed and went to Sodom and Gomorrah. And finally, the third segment, the deepest one. We went deep and a bit deeper. And now we're going the deepest idea. It's so deep that there will be parts of it that I will have to tell you, listen, this is just too deep for me, too advanced. It's beyond me. It's over my head. It's esoterica. It's part of the arcane, understood only by the select few. At the end of our Parsha, we have the bris milah, the circumcision. God tells Abraham, become perfect, walk with me. He changes his name. He gives him the covenant of the land of Israel, the land of Canaan. He says, I'll always be with you. He promises him that Isaac will be born. And he gives them the first mitzvah that every Jewish boy does, the mitzvah of circumcision, the eternal bond that we have with the Almighty that is etched into us, the eternal covenant between the Jew and the Creator. First thing I noticed, chapter 17, verse 3, the verse says that Abraham fell on his face. which is a common motif in the Torah. When there's prophecy and God arrives, you fall on your face. And that's what the Ramban says. Well, you have prophecy. It's an intense experience. You can't handle it and you fall. But Rashi says something else. Why is Abraham falling upon his face? Well, the first thing it says is, well, because there's a certain dread, a certain awe of the Shekhinah, of the divine presence. And then Rashi adds something unbelievable. I didn't notice this until this year. Up to the point of the circumcision, Abraham did not have the strength to stand up while he was experiencing prophecy. And he gives an example. Bilam, the idolatrous, non-Jewish prophet, the verse describes him as he was nofel, he was falling down. Rashi is implying that after the circumcision, Abraham didn't need to fall down. He didn't have the dread, the awe of the Shekhinah, of the divine presence. He was able to stand up. But this, verse 3, is before the circumcision. Abraham does the circumcision at the end of the Parsha. And that's why Abraham fell on his face. He was then called Abram, of course. So to me, this was very interesting because this tells us that circumcision, it gives a person spiritual fortitude to be able to absorb divine revelation. And I had an idea to kind of see another example of this. Before the Exodus, Parshas Bo, we've talked about this in previous years of the Parsha Podcast. The nation did 2 mitzvahs before they left Egypt. 2 mitzvahs that have blood in them, the blood of the paschal offering and the blood of the bris milah, of the circumcision. And Rashi tells us that the nation was supposed to leave, and they were barren, they were empty, they were naked from mitzvos, and they had no merit to leave, and therefore God gave them 2 mitzvos, the blood of the Pesach offering and the blood of the circumcision, the bris milah, and that was the merits that enabled them to leave Egypt. But I had an idea. Maybe there's another wrinkle here. If Rashi tells us that an uncircumcised person does not have the strength to withstand a spiritual revelation of God, and that's why Abraham fell on his face, because before the circumcision he wasn't able to handle it, he wasn't able to bear it. Maybe this is why specifically the mitzvah of circumcision had to be done before the Exodus, because after all, the Exodus, that was a revelation. The firstborn died at the very same moment because there was a revelation of God throughout Egypt. God himself, not an angel, appeared. And those who were spiritually sensitive, namely the firstborn, they couldn't handle it. And the nation, our nation, wouldn't either be able to handle it if they were uncircumcised. And that's why specifically they had to receive the mitzvah of circumcision in order to be able to bear, to withstand the revelation of God at the Exodus. That was an idea, but I wanted to really share with you a midrash that talks about the circumcision. The midrash says, quotes a verse in Psalms, Sod Hashem li'reaf, the secret of God is for those who fear him. This is Psalms chapter 25, verse 14. Ubriso lehodiam, in his covenant to inform them. So the verse starts off talking about a secret of God. We don't know what that means. And then it ends off with the covenant. Says the Midrash, the way to interpret this verse is that the secret of God is the covenant of the circumcision. We think of the circumcision as some sort of surgery, some sort of procedure. The Midrash tells us, this is in Bereshis Rabbah 49:2, that circumcision is a secret of God. And then the Midrash elaborates that, how do we know that it's a secret? Because God didn't reveal it for 20 generations. 10 from Adam to Noah, 10 from Noah to Abraham. For 20 generations, no one knew the secret. Now, the question, of course, we're all asking is, what's the secret? What is secretive about the circumcision? What is hiding beneath this process, this procedure, that would qualify it as a secret? I don't know if this is the actual answer, but that never stopped me from speculating. So I want to speculate that maybe this is the secret. Of course, the location of the circumcision, the covenant, that's at the point of a man's body where their most primal and perhaps base selves is manifested. If you look at the Ramban in his commentary, the Ramban says it's not a coincidence. The reason why we have the covenant of God there, it's to remind us that this force that we have within us should only be used in a proper way, in a mitzvah fashion. We shouldn't allow our impulses and our desires and our lusts to destroy us. And we know there are many, many, many men throughout history that were destroyed because of this. And that's why, says the Ramban, that's why it's placed at that location. I think there's another angle to this. In man's ideal state, the verse tells us, man is created in the image of God. Now what that means, I don't know. All I know is that basically all of our Kabbalistic Torah orients around this verse. Man is created in the image of God. What that means, I don't know what that means. But it tells us that on some dimension, there is some commonality, there's some overlap between man and God. Maybe what this means is that God, of course, is a creator. God created the whole world, the whole universe. But really, God created man, because the whole reason why God created the universe and the world and the stars and the water and the land and the animals, it's all as an arena for man. The Talmud tells us, of course, that really the whole world, all the creations, is all there to service man and to test man and to be an arena where man can exhibit their free will. And God first prepares the environment, and only then does God create man, which is why man is created last. When we think of God as a creator, to a certain extent, we can say that God is the creator of man. You know who else can create man? Man. What this means is that, again, of course, it's not the same thing. On some level, on some dimension, in the image of God is man. God created man. And man can create man. In which area are we most similar to God? In which area are we like a creator? In our ability to procreate. Our highest achievement that we can have is that we too can create another human. The Ramban tells us that this is the area where men are challenged more than any other place. It's no surprise. Wherever you have great capacity for spiritual greatness, there must be an equal counterbalance of capacity for destruction. And therefore, that's where the Yetzer Hara targets. The Yetzer Hara targets strength. It targets our capacity for greatness. And maybe this is the secret. The secret is that in this same location is both our biggest hamstring, our biggest Achilles heel, and our biggest opportunity. And you may think, well, if I'm going to be in some capacity, in some dimension like God, I have to ascend to the heavens. I have to do something cosmic. No. Even in the area where you potentially could be the most base, where you could be taken over by the Yetzer Hara, in that area, there is holiness. In that area, you can find a covenant with God. Maybe that's the secret. We're just speculating here. Continues the Midrash. The word sod, which means secret, the secret of God. The word sod is samach, vav, daled. Samach is 60, vav is 6, daled is 4. 60 plus 6 plus 4 is 70. Sod equals 70. In the merit of 70, we have the 70 souls that descended to Egypt. In the merit of 70, we have the 70 elders, the Sanhedrin. In the merit of 70, we have Moshe, who teaches the Torah in 70 languages. All that. Our nation, 70 souls. Our leaders, the 70 elders. Our Torah, our birthright, and our obsession, and our identity as a nation. All that comes in the merit of circumcision. And then the Midrash continues, and it says something which is very secretive. And I don't even know what this means, and I tried to find out. I even spoke to my brother-in-law, Rabbi Botnick. It's very advanced. With the circumcision, the name of God, two names of God, the name Shakai and the name Yod-Kei-Vav-Kei, get etched into a person. This is an idea that you find all over the Kabbalistic literature, not because I'm an expert, but because today, when I'm researching how I'm going to say this in the podcast, I did some searching and I found that everyone talks about it. It's a big deal and no one really explained it the way that I understand, so I'm not going to explain it. But the name Shakai, one of the names of God, the name Havaya, the 4-letter ineffable name of God, those two are etched into a person with the circumcision. Of course, these are all secrets. We don't really know what the secret is. But then the Midrash ends with something very beautiful, which I think is much more understandable for us. God tells Abraham, circumcise yourself. Abraham says, well, who should do the circumcision? And God says, well, you do it. So Abraham grabbed a scalpel. And he took the foreskin, and he was coming to cut it. And he was scared. Says the Midrash. God, so to speak, grabbed the scalpel and held it together with Abraham. And Abraham did the procedure, did the circumcision, but God was with him. And it quotes the verse in Nehemiah, chapter 9. Atu Hashem Elokim asher bacharta b'Avraham. You are Hashem, our God, who chose, who selected Abraham. V'karos lo habris ein sivkan. It doesn't say that you forged a covenant with him. Rather, it says, V'karos imo habris. You forged a covenant together with him. This covenant wasn't just God and Abraham, it was God together with Abraham. And this teaches us, says the Midrash, that the Almighty was holding, so to speak, Abraham's hand. I found this to be very beautiful. Abraham's doing something which is a bit secret. We don't know what the secret is, but for 20 generations, no one knew the secret. There's something very mysterious and deep being done over here. And Abraham's terrified. And for us, it's kind of a routine thing. Yeah, Abraham's a little older. Okay, fine. But it's very routine. This morning, in our shul in Houston, there were 2 circumcisions. It's common. It's routine. It's not a very complicated surgery. Abraham's worried. He's scared. He needs God, so to speak, to hold his hand. I don't know what exactly Abraham was so terrified, but again, that won't stop us from speculating. We know the Talmud tells us that the foreskin, the arla, that is symbolic of the Yetzer Hara. And by circumcising, that is a first step for us trying to remove and excise this Yetzer Hara from upon us. And Abraham was the first one to do it. And we know the firsts are the most difficult. And when I read this midrash, it reminded me of the erection of the Mishkan, of the tabernacle, in the end of the book of Exodus. They did all the work to create all the materials and to build all the vessels and to assemble everything for the Mishkan, but no one was able to lift the beams until Moshe did it. And Rashi tells us that Moshe appeared to be doing it, but really God was helping him. And thus the Mishkan, the tabernacle, was initially assembled. And the question that we posed in a previous Parsha Podcast is, well, if it's so heavy, if it's so difficult to maneuver, then the fact that Moshe did it, then God helped Moshe, because even Moshe wasn't able to do it by himself. If that was how the Mishkan was initially assembled, what happened the next day and the next time? And they were constantly assembling, disassembling, traveling, and rebuilding the Mishkan. If it was so hard to do it, then how'd they do in the future? And the answer that we gave is that the first time you do something, the Satan, the Yetzer Hara, is going to mount a fierce resistance. Moshe was about to install a permanent base for God in the world. And the Yetzer Hara says, this is not going to happen. This is my world. I don't want God here. And the Yetzer Hara embedded itself, so to speak, in that beam. You ain't going to lift this beam. And no human could have done it. Only Moshe, with God's help. That's the only way to do it. The foreskin, that is a base of the Yetzer Hara within our body, within our little world. The notion of removing, the first time that's done, it's like moving the beams. You can't do it. Even Moshe needs God's help. Once it was done once. It's already been established in this world. And then it becomes much easier. All the subsequent times that the Mishkan was assembled and disassembled, any individual, the Levites, the families that were in charge of it, they were able to do it. The first time, no human could have done it. Similarly, Abraham, the first time circumcision was done, the first time that there was this mitzvah, which was symbolic of the excision, the removal of the evil inclination, and the establishment of the crown of God in our body. That's like the building of the Mishkan within ourselves. And no human could have pulled it off by themselves. Even Abraham, he understood it was impossible to do it. And God helped him and did it alongside him. What a beautiful idea. I think it's a very valuable idea for us. That God aids us in our difficult tasks. The first time we do something, it's the hardest. And also what we actually mean with this covenant. This covenant symbolizes what our nation stands for. This is the mark of the Jew. The Jew stands for the removal of the foreign god, of the Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination from upon their body, but really from upon the world, and instead to reestablish the kingdom of God within ourselves and within the world. It's deep. It's even a little deeper than deep. It's maybe the deepest that we can go. We a few times had to raise up our hands in surrender and say that it's way too deep for us. But that's what we try to do over here on the Parsha Podcast. My name is Yaakov Wolbe. My email address is rabbiwolbe@gmail.com. I have a lot of other podcasts that I would love if you would sample. Listen to them. I work really hard, not only on the Parsha Podcast, but also on those other shows. I try to get to every email that's ever sent to me. I respond personally. It does take some time. I'm really embarrassed at the size of my inbox right now. It's bulging. And some of y'all are thinking, well, you haven't got to my email from like a month and a half ago. Please forgive me. I try to get to everyone. Oh, well, I strive to get to every single email and to respond to myself, but I do like to do it in bunches. As I mentioned the previous week, my docket is, thank God, very, very full. I just finished another chapter for my upcoming book, Please God, yesterday. It's a ton of work. I love every second of it. And I love all of y'all, of course. Have a wonderful day, a splendid week, a sensational Shabbos. Put in your prayers, put in your Torah study for the success of our people. It really, really matters. It really, really makes a difference. And don't take my words about the Make-A-Wish Foundation so seriously. I'm trying to convey a point. Don't get caught up in the example. Don't get it's okay. It's okay. You can take it to the game. It's okay. But the principle is important for us to remember. Have an amazing rest of your week. Send me an email, rabbiwolbe@gmail.com, and please, God, without the money, we'll talk again next week.